Hey guys, Ben here. I'm a physician assistant or PA, and I've been working in the emergency room for almost a decade now. And so in this video, I'm going to share several pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of being an ER PA, an emergency room physician assistant. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So here are some of the advantages first. So one of the advantages is pay. The pay is pretty good. Nothing to complain about, nothing to sneeze at. So pretty decent compensation. It's not the highest or the lowest for PAs, but it's pretty decent. So I'll call that one of the advantages. Another one is it can be pretty fun. You do a lot of hands-on stuff. You get to sew up lacerations. You get to cut open pus pockets or abscesses. You get to, do other interesting procedures and kind of run around. And it just can be kind of fun with some of the stuff that you're dealing with. Speaking of which, another advantage is that it's fast-paced. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? Well, it's kind of an advantage because it makes the time go by quickly. It can be kind of invigorating and satisfying to kind of juggle all the pieces and kind of run around and make it all work, essentially. So being fast-paced is kind of an advantage. Another big advantage, this is a big one compared to like a lot of outpatient clinics, which is, a huge percentage of where PAs work. A big advantage is you don't take your work home with you. Now, as I say that, I realize you kind of do take your work home with you, but here's what I mean. You don't go home and do all your documentation at home. So I know a lot of PAs or doctors who work in like family practice or internal medicine, and they're trying to see all their patients, squeeze them into these 15-minute time slots, and maybe they don't have time to do all the charting. And so they go home and they do the charting at night at home. That sounds miserable. But pretty much I do all my charting while I'm on my shift, and that's pretty typical for an ERPA. So that's one of the advantages. Now, why did I say we actually do kind of take our work home with us? Well, it can be stressful. You can have a little PTSD after your shift. So that's one way you might take your home with you. But I'm still talking about the advantages, so we'll focus on that for one more moment. So another advantage is all the collaboration with your coworkers and with the doctors. So you work with a lot of people if you work in the ER. So at first you're like, who are all these people? What are their names? But then eventually, once you get to know them a little bit, it's kind of fun to say hi to everybody and then to interact and work together to accomplish whatever the goals are. So working with all those people, collaborating is fun. So those are some of the big advantages of working in the ER as a PA. So what are some of the disadvantages? What are some disadvantages? What are some of the downsides? Well, I already alluded to one. It can be stressful. Somebody might die. You might feel like you made a mistake and something bad happened. Or it's just stressful because 100 patients come in all at once and you're trying to figure out how to see a bunch of patients all at once. And it might be impossible. But, there's kind of this expectation like, oh, you got to go see all these patients or whatever. So it can be stressful from multiple different standpoints. And that is why I mentioned the PTSD. So you can kind of go home and have to kind of process everything that happened. And if you're trying to go home and just sleep right afterwards, good luck. So yeah, the stressfulness. So that's one of the disadvantages. Another big one, or a series of big ones, is nights, weekends, and holidays. Because guess what? The ER is always open, so somebody has to work nights, somebody has to work weekends, somebody has to work holidays. And if you work in the ER, you're probably going to take a turn doing any or all of those at some point in time. So I've done all those things. I've done a ton of night shifts. I work weekends more often than not. And I've worked, Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, just worked July 4th the other day. Worked New Year's. I've worked all those holidays at different times. So I don't work all the holidays every year. You usually kind of take turns. But that's just the fact that you have to do nights, weekends, holidays. That's a big disadvantage of working in the ER as a PA. Another disadvantage, I alluded earlier to that you get to collaborate with a lot of people. Well, a disadvantage is you have to collaborate with a lot of people. In other words, there might be difficult personalities or whatever, and there's all these different people, and then specifically the physicians, like the doctors that I work with, because I have to kind of, work with them and kind of, be on the same page to some extent. Because ultimately we're going to be like, okay, here's what the patient came in for. We're going to do this, this, and this, and here's the plan. I may come up with that plan and kind of explain it to them, and they'll be like, okay, good, or not so good, or whatever. Or they might, just intervene and be like, hey, why don't we do this, or whatever. But as you can imagine, some people are easier to work with than others. it's a huge chasm. It's a huge divide where some days are a lot smoother for that very reason, just because of like personality types and so forth. And so you have to be flexible. You have to kind of be able to adapt to different challenges, different people, different styles, all that stuff. But in some ways, that's one of the disadvantages of being a PA in the ER, is all the different people that you have to work with and adapt to as time goes on. Those are some of the advantages and disadvantages of being a PA in the ER. And in a different video, I shared 5 advantages of being a PA over being a doctor. And in another video, I shared some advantages and disadvantages, or in other words, like a comparison between PAs and NPs, physician assistants and nurse practitioners. So check out one of those videos if you're interested, and I'll catch you next time.